The war was already over. Sorvinkal knew this the way he knew everything quietly, without feeling, the way a very old man knows what the weather will do before the clouds arrive. He had filed the end of conflict paperwork 3 days ago. 40 years of war against the human species, and the conclusion fit neatly into 6 administrative forms. He stood at the front of the conclave bridge and looked at the star maps. Humanity's last remaining fleet, 11 ships, barely that was drifting somewhere near the outer rim. No fuel, no reinforcements, no world left to go back to. The conclave had burned their colonies one by one, slowly and without pleasure. It was a job. It was always just a job. Around him, the bridge officers moved and talked and ran their numbers. The flagship times eternal accord times hummed beneath his feet. 700 meters of conclave engineering. The finest ship in the largest fleet in the known galaxy. Pointed at a dead civilization's last gasp. He was 412 years old. He had done this before. 12 species, total. He remembered each one. The Drell, who screamed prayers at the end. The Oshan, who tried to negotiate with biology they didn't understand. The Sunmerit, who simply stopped reproducing and let time do the work that weapons couldn't. Humans were different, only in that they had taken 40 years instead of the usual 10. Stubborn things. Signal from the human fleet. High Arbiter. The officer at communications was young. They were all young to Sorvinkal. She had 3 of her 6 arms raised and her secondary eyes were wide. It is formatted as a surrender communication. Correct protocols, correct encryption. Everything matches. Send it to my screen. He read it. He read it again. The language was correct. The legal phrasing, copied perfectly from conclave surrender doctrine. The acknowledgement of defeat. The cessation of hostilities. The request for terms. Everything. In order. Then he reached the coordinates. The location designated for formal capitulation proceedings. Sol's team. Earth. Sorvinkal did not move. He kept his face in the arrangement. It was always in flat, quiet. The face of a man processing administrative data. His 6 arms remained folded. Earth. The human home planet. The one they had abandoned 3 centuries ago when they finally cracked transit technology and poured every surviving human body into colony ships, pointed at the stars. The Conclave's own survey teams had logged it 20 years into the war standard procedure, cataloged enemy assets and filed it as biologically inert, geologically dormant, no population, no infrastructure, no strategic value, a dead rock, circling a medium star. He pulled up the survey file. It was 300 years old. That was not unusual. The Conclave surveyed thousands of systems. They did not resurvey things that had been logged as inert. You didn't watch a body after you confirmed it wasn't breathing. He read the survey data. Read it again. Put it down. Around him, his officers were already discussing fleet positioning for the Sol transit, which formation to take, how many ships were necessary for a formal surrender reception, whether to bring the full fleet or send a delegation. Someone mentioned that receiving the final human surrender in person would look well in the conclave record. Standard delegation, Sorvinkal said. 40 ships. We leave within the hour. 40? High Arbiter? For 11 crippled human vessels? 40. He moved away from the screen. He walked to his private station at the back of the bridge, where the secondary displays lived, and he pulled up the survey file again, and he looked at one specific line in the geological data. Tectonic activity, within normal parameters. Normal parameters. He thought about that. He thought about what normal meant, specifically, and whether whoever had filed this survey had been careful enough with their numbers. He did not share what he was thinking. He never did. He approved the fleet deployment, signed the administrative forms, dictated 3 messages to Conclave Central Command, all routine, all calm, filed a preliminary end-of-conflict notification. Then he sat very still for a long time. On the human flagship, a ship that had no name anymore, because names felt too heavy to carry, Commander Yael Dross finished recording the surrender transmission and cut the feed. The bridge around him was quiet. It was always quiet now. There had been a full crew once. There had been voices, arguments, the sound of people eating and complaining and laughing at things that weren't very funny, because laughing at things that weren't very funny was how you stayed sane on a ship in a war. Now there were 9 people. 9 people, 11 ships, 40 years. He stood at the viewport and looked at the star ahead. Sol. He had not been back in 30 years. Most of the 9 people on this bridge had never seen it at all, born on colony ships, raised on worlds that were gone now, carrying in their chests the specific kind of grief that has no ceremony, because there's no one left to hold the ceremony with. He pressed his hand flat against the viewport glass. The glass was cold. Sol was still far enough away to look like any other star. Bright, patient, waiting. Dross kept his hand there. He was thinking about his children. He was not going to tell anyone that. He was not going to tell anyone anything about his children, ever, in whatever time he had left. That was the deal he had made with himself on the day the Wrath Purge ended, and he understood what the numbers meant. He pulled his hand back. "Did the transmission go through?" he said. "Yes, Commander." Did they read the coordinates?" "Confirmed receipt." He nodded. Behind him, one of his 9 people, a young man named Okafor, who had been 17 when he enlisted, and was now not young at all, asked the question that everyone on the bridge was thinking. "Commander, are we actually surrendering?" Dross looked at Sol. "We're going home," he said, which was not an answer. Okafor understood this and said nothing more. Dross had added 6 words to the end of the transmission, after the formal surrender language, in a section of the signal that Conclave Protocol would flag as addendum data and route to the High Arbiter's personal feed. He had thought about those 6 words for a long time before using them. "She's been waiting for you." Simple words. The kind a dying species would say at the end of 40 years. The kind a translator would log as grief speech, cultural artifact, emotional noise, from a people who had nothing left but their feelings. The kind Sorvin Kahl would replay 11 times in the dark of his private quarters and understand in a way he would not be able to explain to anyone on his staff. Dross knew about Sorvin Kahl. You spent 40 years fighting someone's fleet. You learned who was actually afraid and who was just doing paperwork. The High Arbiter had been afraid for years. He hid it perfectly. But Dross had read the subtle things, the choice of weapons, the hesitation before certain systems, the survey team they'd sent to Earth 20 years ago and then pointedly never sent again. Sorvin Kahl knew something. He just didn't know what he knew yet. Dross was going to show him. He turned from the viewport. He looked at his 9 people, all that was left of a species that had crossed the stars and fought the largest military force in the known galaxy for 40 years, and refused, stubbornly, specifically, almost absurdly, to simply stop. "Set course for Sol," he said. "Standard speed. No rush." He walked to his chair and sat down. He did not look at the viewport again. He didn't need to. He could feel it the way you feel a thing you have carried in your chest for 30 years. The way you feel something ancient and patient that has been waiting in the dark and knows, now, that waiting is almost over. Earth was ahead, and Earth had been listening for a very long time. Earth looked the way dead things always looked. Quiet, patient, finished. The Conclave fleet dropped out of transit in a wide arc around the Sol system. 40 ships spreading into standard formation, weapons charged, but aimed at nothing in particular, because there was nothing in particular to aim at. 11 broken human ships sat off to the side, not moving, not threatening, the way wounded animals sit when they are done fighting. High Arbiter Sorvin Kahl stood at the bridge viewport and looked at the planet below. Blue and gray and white, old cloud systems, slow and thick, the oceans dark. The land masses bare of any light, no cities, no infrastructure, no sign that 8 billion people had ever built anything there. 3 centuries of human absence had given the planet back to itself. The forests had come back, the survey said. The rivers, the animals that hadn't gone extinct. All of it growing back quietly in the dark, with no one watching. "Initial scans, High Arbiter." Science Officer Delrin Voss read from his display in the clipped, fast voice he always used when he wanted to seem thorough. "Atmospheric composition. Within expected range for a post-population planet. Tectonic activity nominal. Magnetic field reading standard. No energy signatures consistent with weapons, infrastructure, or population. The planet is Tex. Keep scanning, Sorvin Kahl said. Delrin Voss paused. High Arbiter. The initial scan is keep scanning. Delrin Voss kept scanning. Sorvin Kahl watched the planet. It was beautiful. He had not expected that. Or perhaps he had, and had chosen not to think about it. He had filed paperwork on 12 species homeworlds. He had never stood and looked at one from orbit before the paperwork was finished. Earth was beautiful the way something is beautiful when it has survived a very long time and carries that survival in every surface. He told himself he was being irrational. He was not an irrational creature. He watched the planet. 18 hours in, Delrin Voss flagged something. The tectonic data, which had been reading as nominal, had shifted. Not dramatically. Not in any way that would trigger an alert on its own. But Delrin Voss was, underneath his clipped voice and his need to seem thorough, actually thorough. The tectonic readings are repeating, he said. Repeating how? Sorvin Kal said. The same pattern, at the same interval. I've run it back 12 hours, same sequence, same duration, same pause, same sequence again. It's not drifting the way geological activity drifts, it's... He stopped. Say it. It's precise, High Arbiter. The bridge went quiet in the way a room goes quiet when everyone hears something they don't want to have heard. Precise. Geological activity was never precise. Tectonic systems were massive and chaotic plates, grinding against plates, in the endless, slow argument of a planet's interior. They produced patterns the way storms produced patterns. Roughly, approximately, never precise. Log it, Sorvin Kal said. Continue monitoring. Delrin Voss logged it. He looked like a man who wished he hadn't found anything. By hour 36, the magnetic field had joined in. The fluctuations started small, minor variations, the kind that happened on any planet with a molten core. But they built over 6 hours into something that made the communications officers sit forward and stare at their screens. It was a signal, not a broadcast, nothing aimed outward, nothing trying to reach them. Something more like a pulse. A language of pure rhythm, firing in sequences that repeated and varied and repeated again. The Conclave's senior linguist, a Veth named Harun Sev who had cracked 14 alien communication systems in her career, sat with it for 4 hours. She came to Sorvin Kal with her secondary arms wrapped around herself, which was what she did when she was uncomfortable. I cannot parse it, she said, not because it is complex, because it is not like any communication I have studied. It does not have the architecture of language. It is older than language. It is what language comes from. What does it feel like? Sorvin Kal asked. She was surprised by the question. He was not usually a man who asked what things felt like. Like counting, she said, like something counting itself. She left. Sorvin Kal looked at the planet. Something counting itself. He thought about the ruins at the galaxy's edge, far past where any current civilization maintained territory. He had seen them once, 20 years ago, on a survey mission he had never filed a complete report on. The ruins of EM7, 2 million years old, the remnants of something that had consumed an entire planet, every gram of rock and metal and mineral building something. The shape of the ruins matched nothing in any known design catalog. Until now, he put that thought away. He was not ready for it yet. At hour 61, he authorized a scout ship for low-orbit atmospheric sampling. Standard procedure. The ship was called Times Survey Miner 12, a small vessel, crew of 6, equipped with atmosphere reading instruments and nothing else because it was going to look at clouds, not fight anything. It descended. The bridge watched on the feed. The ship moved through the upper atmosphere, thick white cloud cover, slow turbulence, nothing unusual. The sampling instruments were reading. The crew confirmed entry, confirmed stability, confirmed they were beginning their pass. Then the clouds moved. Not with the wind. Not in any direction the atmospheric models predicted. A section of cloud cover, enormous and white, and moving with a kind of slow deliberateness that had no meteorological explanation, simply opened. Survey Miner. 12 times descended into the gap. The clouds closed. The feed cut. Silence on the bridge. Complete silence. The kind that follows something that no one has a procedure for. Officers looked at their screens and then at each other and then at Sorvin Kal, waiting for him to produce a category that this event fit into. He did not produce one. Hail them, he said. They hailed. No response. Weapons scan any energy signature consistent with a kill event? No, High Arbiter. Debris field? No, High Arbiter. The ship was gone. 6 crew members. Gone. No flash. No explosion. No distress signal. No wreckage. The atmospheric models showed no storm capable of destroying a vessel that quickly. The cloud cover where the ship had vanished was still and white, and completely peaceful. Sorvin Kal stood at the viewport and looked at Earth. He thought, she's been waiting for you. He thought about what waited patiently for something to come close enough. He thought, we should leave. He did not give that order, because leaving was not how the conclave operated, and because leaving would require an explanation he did not have, and because, most honestly, in the part of himself where he kept the things he never said out loud, he did not think leaving would help. 12 hours later, Survey Minor 12's times telemetry resumed. Every screen on the bridge lit up. Officers rushed to their stations. The signal was strong, clear, completely organized. No static, no distress codes, no SOS embedded in the data. Just readings. Clean, careful, systematic readings of the scout ship's hull composition, its fuel systems, its weapons specifications, its communications array, its life support design, the kind of readings a scientist takes when studying something new. Earth was studying the ship. Earth was learning the ship the way it had learned everything else that had ever come close enough to be learned from. Sorvin Kahl stood very still. Around him, his officers were pulling data, running projections, drafting emergency protocols. 3 of them were talking at the same time. Someone suggested pulling the fleet back to the outer system. Someone else suggested a weapons demonstration aimed at the surface. Someone used the phrase, precautionary bombardment, and 2 other people agreed. Sorvin Kahl let them talk. He was looking at the planet. It was still beautiful, quiet, patient, finished looking. He understood now that it was none of those things. He thought about the ruins at the galaxy's edge. The civilization that had built something matching this profile and then simply vanished from all records. Not destroyed, not collapsed from within. Vanished, the way a species vanishes when it completes the thing it was building and has no further reason to be visible. He thought, whatever EM7 built, they used it. He thought, I am standing at the edge of that decision. He turned from the viewport. Hold position, he said. No weapons fire. No further scout deployments. High Arbiter. The ship. Hold position. He walked to his chair and sat down. He needed to think. He needed to think about how a dead planet counted itself in the dark for 300 years and what it was counting toward. He needed to think about 6 words in a human surrender transmission. She's been waiting for you. He had replayed it 14 times now. He thought he was beginning to understand what it meant. He was not sure he wanted to be right. Dross walked across the docking bridge alone. No guards. No escort. He had one sidearm holstered at his hip, which everyone on the Conclave flagship could see, and which he made no move to hide, because a man with one gun walking into the largest warship in the known galaxy was not a military threat. He was a statement. The statement was, I am not here to fight. I am past fighting. He looked at, 58 years old, built like a man who had spent his whole life carrying more than he should. Face settled into lines that had stopped being stress and started being permanent a long time ago. He moved with the unhurried walk of someone who had run out of reasons to rush. The Conclave Honor Guard met him at the end of the bridge. 7 soldiers, 3 species, weapons at their sides. They were watching him the way you watch something you've been told is dangerous but that doesn't look dangerous, which was the most unsettling kind of dangerous to be around. He nodded at them. They walked him to the council chamber. The chamber was large and formal and designed to make whoever sat on the receiving end of it feel small. High ceilings, long table, 7 conclave admirals in full insignia, representing the 7 member species that had voted to prosecute the war against humanity. Sorvin Kahl sat at the head. He was the oldest thing in the room by 3 centuries. He also looked like the only person in the room who had slept the night before, which meant either he had made peace with something, or he was very good at performing calm. Dross had dealt with him through 40 years of war. He knew which it was. Dross sat down. He folded his hands on the table. The 7 admirals waited for him to speak first. That was the formal posture. The surrendering party spoke first. Acknowledged defeat. Asked for terms. It was scripted. Everyone in the room knew the script. Dross looked at Sorvin Kahl. You want to know what she is, he said. Not the script. The admirals shifted. One of them, a Farathi officer, broad-shouldered, 4 arms. The one who had signed the order burning the Kepler colony, made a sound that was the Farathi equivalent of impatience. You are here to surrender, the Farathi said. You have 11 ships, no fuel, and no habitable worlds. This meeting is a formality. Dross did not look at the Farathi. He kept his eyes on Sorvain-Kal. "You want to know what she is?" he said again. Sorvain-Kal was quiet for a moment. Then, "Tell me." Dross did not launch into it. He was not a man who launched into things. He set it up the way you set up something heavy carefully, with attention to the base first. He talked about Earth. Not Earth now. Earth then. 10,000 years ago, and 2,000 years ago, and 500 years ago, before the colony ships, before the stars. He talked about what it meant to live on a single world for 10,000 years with limited resources and too many people, and not enough of anything. "We fought each other," he said, "constantly. Wars over land, wars over water, wars over which group of us believed the right things about the world. We almost wiped ourselves out a dozen times. Disease, climate, our own weapons. We kept getting close to the edge. And surviving," Sorvain-Kal said. "And surviving," Dross said. He let that sit for a moment. "We thought that's what we were doing. Surviving, fighting back. Being stubborn enough to not finish dying. We built medicines and shelters and weapons and systems, and every generation figured out what the last generation almost died from and tried to make sure it wouldn't happen again." He unfolded his hands, folded them again. "We weren't surviving," he said. The room waited. "We were teaching." The Farathi admiral made another sound. "Teaching what? To whom? What?" Dross looked at him for the first time. "The planet," he said. "It landed the way heavy things land. Nobody reached for it right away. The room sat with it. Every crisis we went through," Dross continued, returning his eyes to Sorvain-Kal. "Every plague, every war, every time we burned the world a little more, and then rebuilt Earth felt all of it. The soil held our dead. The water carried our chemicals. The atmosphere absorbed what we burned. For 10,000 years, we handed that planet a detailed record of everything in the universe that could cause harm." He paused, and Earth filed every entry. Sorvain-Kal had not moved. He had the look of a man hearing something confirmed that he had been sitting with for a long time and had hoped was wrong. "We were the syllabus," Dross said. He said it once. He did not repeat it. He did not explain it further. He moved on. "When we left when the colony ships launched 300 years ago and humanity moved to the stars, Earth was alone. We thought we had abandoned it. The surveys said it was dying. The atmosphere was recovering from what we'd done to it, slowly. The oceans were rebalancing. It looked like a world healing from an illness." He looked at his hands. "It wasn't healing, it was finishing." "Finishing what?" one of the other admirals asked. Younger voice. Scared voice. The kind of scared that sounds like it's trying to sound like professional inquiry. "Processing everything we taught it," Dross said. "Every pathogen we'd survived. Every weapon we'd built and used on ourselves. Every catastrophic system failure we'd engineered and then had to engineer a solution for. 300 years of quiet. To go through 10,000 years of curriculum. A planet cannot do this," the young admiral said. "A planet is rock and mineral, and Earth is not a normal planet," Dross said. Quiet again. "We knew this," Dross said. "Some of us knew it. The ones who paid attention. The ones who noticed that Earth produced life in configurations that shouldn't have worked. That species on Earth survived extinction events that should have finished them. That the planet itself had been through 5 major extinction events, and every time, every single time, life came back stronger than before." He looked at Sorvain-Kal. "Your survey team called it geologically dormant. They were there for 6 days. They looked at the surface." Sorvain-Kal said nothing. 6 days, Dross said. "On a planet that's been running its own algorithm for 4 billion years. You saw what it wanted you to see." The Farathi admiral leaned forward. His forearms flattened against the table, a posture that meant he was deciding whether to be angry or afraid and hadn't chosen yet. "You brought us here," he said. "You surrendered, issued the right codes, used the right language specifically to bring our fleet to Earth. This was never a surrender." "It was always a surrender," Dross said, "just not ours." The Farathi chose angry. "You have nothing," he said. 11 ships. "No. We have her," Dross said. Simple, quiet. The Farathi stopped. "We have Earth," Dross said. "And Earth has been studying your scout ship for the last 12 hours. Your hull composition, your fuel systems, your weapons, your life support." He tilted his head slightly. How long do you think it takes a planet that spent 10,000 years learning how to counter every threat that ever touched its surface to build a counter for yours? No one spoke. We didn't lead you here to destroy you, Dross said. We're not a destroy-things species. We never were. We led you here to show you what 40 years of trying to kill us actually made. He looked at Sorvain Kal again. You wanted to know what she is. Sorvain Kal looked back. How long has she been awake? Sorvain Kal asked. His voice was low. The first time in the entire meeting it had dropped out of its administrative register into something older. Dross held his gaze. The whole time, he said. She was waiting for someone to come close enough to notice. Pause. You took 40 years. We thought you'd come sooner. The room was silent. The Farathi admiral had both sets of arms pulled in close to his body. The young admiral was not looking at anyone. Even the honor guard at the door had gone completely still. Sorvain Kal sat with his eyes on Dross and said nothing for a long time. Then he said, quietly, to no one in particular, the ruins. Dross looked at him. For the first time something moved in Dross's face. Not surprise. Recognition. You've seen them, Dross said. It was not a question either. Sorvain Kal nodded. Once. Slowly. The way very old creatures move, when they are confirming something they wish they could unknow. Then you understand, Dross said. What we are showing you. Sorvain Kal understood. He had understood since the first anomalous scan. He had been hoping, carefully and without telling anyone, that he was wrong. He was not wrong. The planet moved. That was the fact. Blunt. Impossible. Requiring no elaboration, because no elaboration could help. The seismic sensors across all 40 conclave ships registered it simultaneously. A deep, slow pulse moving through Earth's core, building outward. And then the planet simply shifted. Not dramatically. Not the way a catastrophic event shifts. Slowly, calmly. The way something large stands up after sitting still for a very long time. On the conclave flagship, every alarm that existed for geological events fired at once. A wall of sound and red light that the officers on deck had never heard before, because the instruments that produced those alarms had never been triggered before. They existed, theoretically. They existed the way a door exists in a wall you never expected to open. The door opened. Report, Sorvain Kal said from his chair. 3 officers reported at the same time. He let them. He heard all 3. The planet had moved 340 kilometers from its orbital position. Not drifted, not shifted, due to a gravitational anomaly. Moved actively, with measurable internal thrust. The kind of movement that required energy on a scale that his science officers were now running calculations on, and getting numbers that kept coming out wrong. The fleet reacted. Not because anyone gave an order. Because 40 warships crewed by beings with working self-preservation instincts saw a planet move, and those instincts kicked in without waiting for command authorization. Engines fired. Formation broke. Ships scattered into wider orbits, putting distance between themselves and the thing below, and then realized that distance was relative when the thing below was a planet, and held their positions with the specific frozen quality of animals that have startled themselves by running and now don't know what to do. Weapons lock? Sorvain Kal said. We have targeting solutions, High Arbiter. But the targeting systems were not designed for. The weapons officer stopped. Started again. The targeting systems do not have a template for an object of this mass moving under its own power. The solutions are coming back inconsistent. Sorvain Kal had expected this. Not because he had specifically planned for it, but because the universe had a rule about weapons built to counter known threats, and how useful they were against things that were new. Do not fire, he said. High Arbiter. It is not attacking, do not fire. Earth was not attacking. This was what made it worse. In the specific way that all deeply wrong things become worse when they are calm. An attacking planet would have been frightening in a clean, clear way. There were procedures for frightening things. Procedures were comforting. Earth was doing something that had no procedure. It was broadcasting. The magnetic field emissions which had been pulsing in that rhythmic, self-counting pattern since the first hours of the fleet's arrival changed. The rhythm expanded. The pulse grew stronger, directional, spreading outward through the Sol system and beyond, building in strength as it reached FTL propagation range, which was not something a magnetic field was supposed to be able to do. and which the communications officers on every ship flagged as impossible in the same moment that their instruments confirmed it was happening. The broadcast was going out across the galactic arm, not everywhere, not an unfocused general signal. The emissions were precise, sharply aimed at specific coordinates, specific systems, specific worlds. Delrin Voss, pale and speaking too carefully, delivered the finding to Sorvin Kal. High Arbiter. We have matched the broadcast coordinates to the Conclave member registry. Every civilization that formally voted to support the war against humanity is receiving this signal. Silence. Everyone? Everyone. Additionally, every species that participated in any direct military action, colony destructions, population processing, any formal action logged in the conflict record. Sorvin Kal sat very still. What is the signal content? Delrin Voss hesitated. Hesitation was not his normal register. We cannot determine content in the traditional sense, High Arbiter. It is the same pattern as the earlier emissions, not language, not data as we define data. But our linguist believes. He stopped. Harun Sev's assessment. She says it feels like. He checked his notes. The way people check notes when they want to make sure they are accurately conveying something they wish they didn't have to convey. Like filing. She says it feels like very careful, very organized filing. Sorvin Kal understood. Earth was not building a kill list. Earth was building a memory. A permanent, distributed, broadcast across the galaxy memory of exactly who had done what to the species that lived on it. A planet that could not forget. Broadcasting to every party involved the specific fact that it remembered them. He thought, this is not a weapon being fired. This is a weapon identifying its range. On his ship, Dross watched through the viewport. He had requested to return to his vessel for the duration of whatever came next, and Sorvin Kal had allowed it, because Sorvin Kal understood that there was nothing Dross could do to make this worse, and possibly things he could do to make it manageable, and you kept those assets close. Dross watched Earth move. She was beautiful when she moved. He had not expected that either, though he should have. She had always been beautiful. He had seen her in pictures, his grandmother had pictures, physical photographs from before the colony ships, before the digital archives got lost in the third generation of transit, and she looked the same, blue and gray and patient, more alive. Now, Okafor stood beside him. The young man who wasn't young anymore watched the planet shift in its orbit and said nothing for a long time. Then, is she going to destroy them? I don't know, Dross said. This was honest. He did not know. He knew what Earth was. He knew what Earth could do, the way you know what a thing is capable of, without knowing whether it will choose to do it. Earth had not communicated intentions. Earth did not communicate intentions. It communicated patterns and facts and the weight of its attention. Do you want her to? Okafor asked. Dross was quiet. I want it to be over, he said. Sorvin Kal called Dross's ship. Tell me about EM7, he said. He was alone in his quarters. He had cleared the room before making the call. His second-in-command had objected, and Sorvin Kal had used his 400-year-old patience and his rank and his absolute refusal to explain himself. And the second-in-command had left. Dross's face on the screen was unreadable. You know about EM7, Dross said. I have seen the ruins. I have not understood them until now. Dross looked at him. 2 million years ago, Sorvin Kal said, a civilization consumed their home planet. Entirely. Every mineral, every resource, every gram of material, building something. And then they were gone. No record after that point. No ruins of whatever they built. Just the shell of a world they'd used up in silence. He kept his eyes on Dross. The pattern of what they built, the design principles we could reverse engineer from the ruins matches what Earth is doing. Exactly. Down to the magnetic field emission structure. Dross said nothing. EM7 built this, Sorvin Kal said, or something like it, and they used it, and they vanished. He leaned forward. I need you to tell me what happened to them. Sorvin. Dross was quiet for a long moment. We don't know, he said. We found the ruins too. 40 years ago, early in the war, one of our exploration ships found them. We had people who studied the design. He paused. Those are the people who figured out what Earth was. And EM7? Our best guess, Dross said, is that whatever EM7 built, it worked. It ended whoever was threatening them. And then they had this thing, this planet-sized thing that remembers everything and nowhere left to point it. Nothing left to counter. And it kept learning. He looked at the planet through his own viewport. A weapon that learns and has nothing left to learn from is a problem, he said. We think EM7 couldn't turn it off. We think it turned on them. The silence between the two men held the weight of that. Earth won't do that, Sorvain Kal said. No, Dross said. Why not? Because she still has us. He looked at the screen. She won't hurt what she spent 10,000 years building herself around. We're still here. We gave her a reason. Sorvain Kal sat with this. And if we had finished the war, he said, if we had destroyed the last human ships, if there were no humans left, Dross did not answer. He did not have to. Sorvain Kal thought about 40 ships and a very patient planet, and a galactic registry of everyone who had participated in trying to finish a species that apparently should not have been finished. He thought about how close the conclave had come. 11 ships. They had been 11 ships away. I am going to recommend unconditional surrender, Sorvain Kal said. Dross nodded once. Full cessation, full reparations, whatever your people need. Yes, Dross said. Sorvain Kal reached to end the call. High Arbiter, Dross said. He stopped. She's not broadcasting a threat, Dross said. I want you to understand that. She's not telling them what she'll do. She's telling them what she knows, who they are, what they did. He looked at his hands. The most dangerous thing in the universe, he said, is not a weapon that can destroy you. It's something that remembers you, something that will never, ever forget what you did, and will carry that memory as long as it exists. He looked up. Make sure your council understands the difference. The call ended. Sorvain Kal sat alone in his quarters for a very long time. Then he began composing the recommendation for surrender. He wrote it slowly and very carefully, because it was going to be the most important document he had ever filed, and he had 400 years of documents to compare it to. Outside, the planet moved, patient, beautiful, counting. The surrender came in 48 hours. 48 hours from the moment Sorvain Kal sent his recommendation to Conclave Central Command to the moment the formal capitulation document arrived, signed by all 7 member species, stamped with the seals of 12 planetary governments, unconditional in every clause. It was the fastest unconditional surrender in the recorded history of the Conclave. They didn't negotiate. They didn't propose terms. They didn't try to find leverage in the language the way they always did, the way large, powerful bodies always did, slipping soft language into hard clauses and hoping no one read the fine print carefully enough. They signed everything. Full cessation of hostilities. Full withdrawal from all former human colony territories. A reparations framework that was, by any accounting, enormous. They signed it like they were afraid the window would close. Dross read it twice. Then he signed it. He was back in the council chamber. Same room, same long table, same high ceilings, designed to make the other party feel small. He had sat in this room 48 hours ago and explained what Earth was and what it meant, and the room had been full of admirals who were calculating angles and exits and whether this was a bluff and what the cost of calling it would be. Now there were 3 people, Sorvain Kal, Dross, a conclave legal officer who had been brought in to witness the document signing and who had not said anything since entering and had the look of someone who was trying very hard to be professionally invisible. Dross signed his name. Set the pen down. Sorvain Kal watched him across the table. You were never going to use it, Sorvain Kal said. Not an accusation. Observation. The tone of a very old man, confirming a suspicion he'd been sitting with for 2 days. Dross looked at him. The weapon is real, Sorvain Kal continued. The capacity is real. Earth is real. And what Earth is capable of is real. But you brought us here to see it. The surrender signal with the wrong coordinates, that was a delivery mechanism. You needed us in range. Close enough to run the scans. Close enough to see the movement. Close enough to feel it. He folded 2 of his arms. You surrendered to get us into position. The legal officer had gone very still, pretending to look at the document. Dross said nothing. Was any of it real? Sorvain Kal asked. All of it was real, Dross said. But you weren't going to use the weapon. Dross looked at his signed name on the document. We fought 40 years, he said. We lost everything worth counting. We had 11 ships and no worlds. and no plan that ends with us winning a military engagement against the largest fleet in the known galaxy. He smoothed the edge of the document with one finger. We had one move left. He looked up. We made you afraid. The legal officer left shortly after. He moved quickly, the way people move when they want to be somewhere else, without appearing to want to be somewhere else. The room was just Sorvain Kahl and Dross. Sorvain Kahl poured 2 glasses of something from a decanter on the side table. A Veth ceremony, the closing of a formal proceeding, offered to both parties. He set one in front of Dross and held his own. Dross looked at the glass. He didn't touch it yet. We're not a weapon species, he said. We never were. Every war we ever fought was because someone was trying to take something from us or destroy something we'd built. We never started it. We were always finishing it. He looked at his hands on the table. You came after us because we were expanding, taking up space, being alive in places you wanted us not to be alive. Yes, Sorvain Kahl said, without apology. This was the most honest thing about him. He did not apologize for calculations. You expected us to die like the others. Yes. We didn't. No, Sorvain Kahl said. You did not. Dross picked up the glass, held it without drinking. We didn't build Earth into what she is on purpose, he said. We didn't sit down 10,000 years ago and design a plan. We just lived. We struggled and survived and fought and rebuilt, and every catastrophe we went through, we handed the planet the data of it. Every scar we left in the soil, and the water, and the air, she absorbed it. She learned from it. He set the glass down again. The weapon isn't something we made. It's something we times were. Everything we suffered, everything we lost, everything we came back from. His voice stayed level. It had the practiced level quality of a man who has decided what he will and won't allow his voice to do. You spent 40 years trying to kill us, and instead, you became part of the curriculum. Sorvain Kahl was quiet. Your council needs to understand something, Dross said. We are going back to Earth. Humans are going home. We are going to rebuild on that planet. And as long as we are there, as long as any of us are there, she will stay quiet. She will watch. She will keep learning. He looked at Sorvain Kahl directly. But if anyone ever tries to finish what you started, if we get to the last ship again, the last body, the last human alive somewhere in the universe, whatever we made of Earth, will not be the kind of thing that meets you in a council chamber and signs a document. Lestab. The room held that. Make sure they understand, Dross said. Fear us. That's fine. Fear is good. Fear is what this was for. But the thing you should actually be afraid of is not what Earth can do to you. It's what Earth becomes, if you push us far enough that we can't give her a reason to stay still. He pushed the document to the center of the table. He picked up the glass. He drank. The first colony ships arrived in the Sol system 6 months later. Not 11. Hundreds. Ships that had been hidden in systems the Conclave had never thought to search, because you don't search empty systems, because you don't look for life in places that register as lifeless. And humans had become very good, over 40 years, at registering as lifeless. They came in slow and quiet. They came in families and fragments of families and the shapes of communities that had been scattered across a dozen colony worlds, and found each other again in hiding. Old people who had been children on the colony ships that left Earth 3 centuries ago. Young people who had been born in transit, born on strange worlds, born in the specific rootless way of people who have never stood on the planet their species came from. The first landing shuttle touched down on the North American continent. The crew disembarked in silence. They stood in a field. Grass, real grass, earth grass, not the engineered varieties that grew on colony ships. The sky was the specific blue that humans had been describing to each other for 300 years without having seen it. The air was clean and cold and smelled like something that had no name, because the name for it was just times outside, times, and they had never been outside before. Not like this. Not here. A woman named Sarah Doss, no relation to the Admiral. Just the same way a common syllable travels through a language, was the first person to kneel down. She pressed her hand flat into the soil, felt the cold of it, the wet of it, the specific texture of 10,000 years of human civilization composted back into the ground it came from. She kept her hand there. She wasn't thinking about anything she could have put into words. She was just a person with her hand in the ground of the place her species was from, and that was enough. That was the whole thing. The ground moved. Not dramatically. Not a tremor. A pulse deep and small, rising up through the soil, pressing back against her palm for one moment, with the gentle, specific pressure of something that knew she was there. The seismographs on the monitoring ship above would log it as a micro-event, statistically insignificant, well within normal geological parameters. She stayed kneeling for a long time. Around her, the others were coming off the shuttle. She could hear them behind her, the sounds of people arriving somewhere they had never been but which they recognized, the way you recognize something that has been described to you your whole life, in a language that was invented for the purpose of describing it. She pulled her hand back. The soil was still warm. In the Conclave archives, 17 separate member civilization databases, maintained by 17 different species, compiled by 17 different teams of historians who had never spoken to each other. The entry for humanity was updated for the first time in 40 years. Each of the 17 wrote it independently. Each arrived at the same notation. The phrasing differed slightly by species, by language, by the specific way each civilization processed the events they had witnessed. But the meaning was the same. It said, "Do not engage. Do not provoke. Do not begin what you cannot finish with them." And in the records of the Veth, in the personal archive of High Arbiter Sorvin Kal, the oldest serving member of the Conclave Council, there was one additional line that did not appear in any other database. He had written it the night after the signing. He had not filed it officially. It said, "They grieve like a weapon cocked. Whatever you do, do not pull the trigger." He had thought about it for a long time before writing it. He thought it was the most useful thing he had ever recorded. He hoped someone would read it before it was needed again. He thought, knowing the galaxy the way a 400-year-old man knows it, that someone eventually would need to. He hoped they would be afraid enough to listen.